Welcome back into the show. It is now 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. You're tuning in to Pacific Breakfast with me, Tawidi Ili Alpha Mayava, right here on 531 PI. And well, it is time now for another edition of our Talanoa Ako program. As to give you an idea about the program, this is the first time you're tuning in. Talanoa Ako is a Pacific parent education program that aims to equip and empower parents, families, and communities with skills and knowledge, as well as confidence they need to champion their children's education. Facilitating our program is current principal of Rowan Dale School in Manurewa, Mr. Karl Anthony Vasau, as well as Natalie Faitala, the current HOD for English at Wesley College. Good morning to you both, and welcome back once again.
Thank you, Tau Ili. It's good listening to your jokes in the background. You're pretty funny. I must say you're not. So you're from the village, are you?
Well, it's my defense mechanism, sir, when I feel like I'm about to get caught out with the limited English I came to New Zealand with. And yes, very much proud son of Avasele and Nofwali.
Nice. Alohi. Hi, Natalie. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Carl. How are you doing?
Oh, I went fishing in the weekend, and I burnt the back of my neck. Um, and because what you do is you just sit there. It was a We found our rock. It was a good experience with my mate. We had good chat and solved the problems of the world. But when someone next to you catches the big monster and you're like throwing your bait at the same place, it's just chance. What have you been up to?
Had a really busy week too. So we had two birthdays and a funeral this week in my family, but we also went to the beach as well and got to visit some of our local beaches we hadn't been to before, which was really cool.
Yeah. It's amazing Facebook when you see some of the places that people go to and you never knew they existed. And
All right.
love to go there. But then, of course, when the time comes, can't be bothered, or got other things to do. But it's so important. We've got so many beautiful things to see in New Zealand, and
Oh, such a beautiful place. We're really blessed.
yeah, definitely, and great experiences for our kids. So this week we've got a session for you. This will be session 3. But last week we had a little talk about session 2, which was new experiences. So can you just remind us a little bit about what last week was about, Nick?
Yeah, last week we talked about reflecting on last year and having a think about what went well and then deciding what we wanted to achieve this year in 2021 and doing some goal setting with our families. And also we talked about attendance to school and how every day counts in that way. Yeah, that was our session from last week.
Yeah, and that goals is so important, hey. And it's that Talanoa session about sitting down with your family and talking about them and measuring them and finding realistic ways of measurement too. It's not just achievement; it's actually shifts and gains and things like that, which kids really love. This week, we saw the topic there, and it's called learning support. And so we're going to try and talk to you today about what learning support is, who is it for, so what type of students would really benefit from learning support. We'll touch on a few examples of what this may look like in different contexts in primary, secondary, intermediate. Um, we'll look at the type of experiences people may have and the stigma around that kind of getting support equals what does that mean? How does that make you look? That, and just making sure that it's focused on the children. And then, touch on a little bit about how the government shifted its focus on what learning support is, and how it better caters for of our kids. So, Natalie, you're up first, and could you please answer that question? So, what is learning support? You got the hard one today.
No problem. Okay, so learning support refers to the additional support that some children and young people need to engage and achieve in education. And so in the past, learning support might have been referred to as special education. You might have known that under that title, but it's basically the service provided to the learners that have additional learning needs above and beyond. And the government funds schools and kura and the Ministry of Education to provide this service so that it can be accessed free of charge to all students. And the services and support that are provided, they differ depending on the age of your child, and they should be tailored to your child's needs. So our Talanoa today is basically just encouraging our parents and our families to ensure that they're accessing this learning support that's available to meet the needs of their children. And no doubt, we all have children in our families, if not in our own immediate families, in our extended families, that will need this learning support. And so we should check in. This is a good time to think about checking in on what's happening for our students in terms of the supports that are being made available for them, and making sure that they have access to the supports that they need to achieve in their learning going forward. Yeah.
Nice. And it's kind of we all experience our own children or children that we know, where some kids learn at different speeds at different times, and start to embrace things like reading and writing. For us to champion, Tauiri spoke at the start about this is a program for parents to champion their children's education. Part of being a champion is understanding the gaps your child needs and to understand where to take them and how to improve them. And then as a champion, you step up and you talk to the school. Some schools sometimes need reminding. Sometimes schools need a little bit of focus on areas for children's development. And so the first question I would ask when a teacher or the school says to me, there's a gap in my child's education, I would be asking, okay, this is what do I need to do as a parent, but also what are you going to be providing or supporting my child at school to try and help them reach those goals or fill that gap? What does that look like in high school, Nat, when there are gaps, say, for example, in your own area, like for English? What kind of support is offered for children that are doing NCEA, things like that?
Yes, I differs. I guess because learning support covers such a large range of services, and it's there to help all our students that are struggling in different ways, and that can be those that actually have a disability. So students who may have a visual impairment, or students who might be developmentally or cognitively disabled. So students with a disability come under the learning support banner as well, but also just students that struggle with different aspects of learning. They may be dyslexic, they may have autism. There's all these sort of conditions that a student may bring to the school, and it's putting supports in place for that. So in English, we actually do need some extra supports for those particular students. Like it may be a teacher aide is there to assist, and different programs. We use assisted technology at times to help those students that need it. And there's all sorts of things that can be put in place to make learning easier for these students.
Yeah, and that, I suppose, when you look at what you were saying there, there's there's levels of support needed, right from, okay, it's about resourcing, it's about the tools you need, right through to we might need a diagnosis. And a lot of our parents have got that stigma about diagnosing things and then having to live with that. And it's not your fault. It's not your child's fault. It's not your fault. And that kind of blame. But what we can do about it is make your child's experience at school a lot better. We want them to actually achieve, we want them to feel success, whatever success looks like. And it's important as part of your Talanoa goal setting to look at the different levels of success. Through primary and at primary age, it's so important that we identify these things and these areas for development early, so that by the time they get to a higher level of education, we've got a really good understanding of how your children works and where are their gaps and if they needed support. So some of you may have heard of words like reading recovery. Reading recovery is a program just to boost the reading levels of children to an acceptable level so that they can continue successfully in the system that we provide, in the curriculum, engaging that, just blocking those. There are so many wonderful programs that teacher aides can run with children to increase the number of the amount of words they use, vocab, right through to, we've seen part of learning support where big programs like DIMIC, a developmental kind of being implemented, because it's vital. It's not just about a special program, but adapting the way we teach to address those gaps as well. So it's it's a bit of everything, but it's important, so important that parents understand exactly what it is that their child needs to do, or what they need, or what they're missing, so that they can support them. Have you found, what was your experience, Nat, with your own children coming through? Would you like to share any of your own kids needing support, and how did you find it?
Oh, I was really grateful that some teachers identified that some of my children in primary school needed a little bit more assistance. So I think two of my children, the boys, they did do reading recovery at school, and just getting that extra time to spend on doing some extra reading to build their skills and abilities. I think that really assisted them and helped them build a foundation for further learning in the future. And I think, I'm just grateful that these supports are in place and that teachers recognize need in the classroom, and then that they offer these services to help our students, because there's so many different services available. I didn't really have a lot of services that my children accessed, but the ones that they did, I was really grateful for. But there are everything from behavior, attendance, speech and language therapy. There's all sorts of things available out there for those students that need it. And I just really hope that parents are able to make sure that their child is getting what they need.
Yeah. And like everything, like you said, the government provides resourcing for this. And the only way really we can increase the amount of resourcing is by high demand, or by a focused government thinking that this is what is needed. So sometimes within schools, it's about providing the service according to the provision. So it might not be that there might be a few. So in most schools, around about 6 children are able to access reading recovery at any one time for a specific teacher, in order for that program to work really well. Then, of course, schools need to invest money, in staffing. So there's all these other yucky things some people don't think about. But if the high demand is there, and if it can be proven that it's successful, then schools can put a bigger case for a little bit more funding, so that we can have more of our children succeeding, or getting to the point where they're equipped with the skills that they need. But one thing about a lot of these learning support programs is that it needs 100% investment. So we've already talked about 100% investment from parents in relation to understanding it, but also children need to be at school every day to experience the full effect or the results of a program. So nothing's worse than securing some funding through an external agency. So, for example, Ministry of Education, or having specialist teachers or visiting teachers coming along to work with your child on hearing or vision impairment, and then your child is away, or the forms that aren't being filled or signed. There's no stigma behind it. No children are. And I think, the sooner we look at just dispelling that kind of behavior and getting rid of it, the better for all our kids.
Absolutely.
Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. So I had a nephew stay with me once that really did need some extra learning support, and he was staying with us, and he had a lot of behavioral problems. And so I asked the school to access like some psychological testing to see like if we could find out the root of those problems, and also just get some support for him in the classroom. And as a result of that, my intervention and request, he did have the test done, and he was given a teacher aide to come to the classroom. And so that made a big difference to his learning because he had someone supporting him. And I think more people need to do this. More people need to make those requests, because I know as a teacher, I'm so grateful to have teacher aides working alongside me, giving that extra support that's required. Because as one person in front of a group of say 20 plus students, I'm not able to give that support to every single individual that requires it. So the more resourcing we can get into schools, the better. So parents, go and request. If you think your children need extra support, ask for it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's important. It's, if we want children to succeed, they need that support. Teachers need that support. Teachers are the greatest advocates at times too for your children. And so getting alongside your teacher might give them the courage to actually fill out the referral forms, or give them the ability to say, oh, look, they'll support me and they'll get behind me, so I can go to my structures within the school to ensure that the discussion is had about how they've allocated funding. And yeah, I just can't get past that stigma thing. We, in the past, some of our methods may have been a little bit wrong. Streaming children in certain levels was some form of learning support, so that all the special children that needed those gaps filled were all together in one class, and those teachers were specialists to deal with those. But sometimes one of the things we miss is that, and what mainstream offers, is that children can learn from each other, and sometimes each other is important as well. So externally, it's looking for people. Learning support could also be looking for people within your own family, your own churches, your own networks of groups, or even within your own children's classes, and providing an opportunity for them to teach each other and mentor each other. So do you have things like that at high school level, Miss?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done away with streaming. In my particular department, we used to stream. So we used to have a high ability, a mainstream, mid ability, and then those that struggle were all together in one class. And that just doesn't work. That just doesn't work because, there's a real feeling of we're in the low class, people don't have confidence in us, and then they just like lose motivation. But if you put everyone together and you have the high achievers with those that struggle, they pull each other up together, and they help each other out. So you've got those we call it the tuakana, the older, more advanced person leading the younger, struggling person, and they're actually able to role model, good working behaviors for those that struggle, and help them along. So you can actually pair them up and get them to work together. I think streaming in my mind is criminal. It shouldn't exist. We have to have ways for everybody to be working together and helping each other out.
Yeah, definitely. They can learn so much from each other, and parents too. And so that's why these programs like Talanoa Ako are a form of learning support for parents, because we don't know our gaps, and sometimes there's that stigma behind sharing our weaknesses and areas that we think others would judge us on. but getting in a room with some of these Talanoa Ako programs has just been amazing. So session 5, I think it is, we talk about the Talanoa Ako program and hope that others will see that this type of program will be beneficial to them. And so, you've heard a little bit about what learning support is. Every school is different. Every school provides different services. But one of the things that is the same is that there are areas that definitely we know as educators, children need support in, and it's whether or not the demand is there or the children are there to whether or not we access that. All schools have support from the Ministry of Education, so they've got access to external support networks and support people. Some schools have what they call learning support coordinators, which are an initiative from the last government, where they've got a person specifically in the school to address the needs of those children and to engage with parents and to work with programs and to be that liaison person, the stereotypical or the traditional SENCO role within schools. So there's those things they can also access as well. Any last requests or points on learning support, Natalie?
Yeah, I just think maybe to realize that this new approach that the government has to learning support is to localize the support base. And so it's about giving local communities the flexibility to create a learning plan that's going to work for each student. And so it's changed up a little bit from what it was in the past. So in the past, there was rigid criteria that had to be met in order to access the learning support, but this is no longer the case. Teachers, specialists, and services, they can make these decisions without having to meet these rigid criteria that used to be in place for special education. So the learning support is a lot more accessible than it used to be, and it's a lot more localized. So the plan that's come up for each individual, the individual education plan, will be tailored to meet the needs of that student. And whether they need a special program or assisted technology or an aid, that will all be put into that plan, and the goals will be made, the learning goals will be made so that that student is working towards their learning goals. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that these supports are in place. I'm grateful to the people working in our learning support. They're good people. They've got a good heart for our children and for the work that they do. And I just encourage our parents to access this service for their children.
Exactly. And it's, we've all filled out those forms where we're like, oh my God, look at this process and what relevance does this part have? And so that deters a lot of our people. But it starts with you being brave. It starts with you being courageous and being a champion for your child. A conversation with your child's teacher. That's where I want most of you to go from today. What are the gaps in my child and how can we go together and work together to get there? So next week, we've got a topic called transitions. And what's that about, Nat?
So next week we're going to be talking about all the transitions that a child can make through the education system from sector to sector. We're going to be looking at moving from ECE to primary, from primary to maybe intermediate, and then into the secondary space, and then even from secondary into tertiary. And so that's our focus for next week's Talanoa. We'll be looking at the way that our children transition from place to place and how they can navigate that.
Nice. And it should be exciting. This is one that we've focused on. A lot of the COLs, the communities of learning, have focused on an achievement challenge related to transitions, making that smooth movement across. And it's important. So many of our kids are involved in this transient culture where they move from school to school to school. And some of our kids have been to 5 schools by the time they're, 8, 9 years old. And, if you've got 5 job changes in 3 years, you're not going to be very stable, very settled in what you're doing. Imagine what that's doing to our children. But there are so many reasons why. So transitions, look forward to it next week. Thank you very much to all those listeners, all thousands of you. If you've got any questions, write them down the bottom in the little Facebook comment section. we've got so many friends, ain't that kind of, oh, you're amazing. Friends are different. We want some critics too. You think that there's something that we might need to fix up, or the crooked, fix that up. But I'm sure they'd be messaging Tauiri because he's the center of all knowledge. So
Can I just say
thank you.
it's not just thousands, but millions and millions.
Brilliant.
Wow.
Woohoo.
But thank you to you both, and we'll speak to you once again
Thank you.
next week. Have a good week.
You
Thank you.
too.
Cheers.
Ka kite.
Ka kite. All right, that is the end of our Talanoa Ako for today here.